When I was 16 years old, my family moved into an old, creaky house in rural Pennsylvania. My parents were ecstatic because it was a huge upgrade from the cramped apartment we used to live in. They talked about how the backyard was perfect for cookouts and how there were finally enough bedrooms for everyone. My little sister Lily, who was 6, was over the moon because she finally had her own room. I wasn't as thrilled. Something about the house felt wrong. Maybe it was the way the trees seemed to lean in too close, casting weird shadows on the house at sunset. Or maybe it was the old, boarded up well in the backyard. My dad said it was just for show, a relic from another time, but it looked like something straight out of a horror movie. Still, I didn't want to be the only one ruining the vibe, so I kept my feelings to myself. The first night something weird happened. I thought I imagined it. We'd spent the day unpacking, and by the time we were done, everyone was exhausted. I went to bed early, hoping to sleep off the unease I felt all day. My room was upstairs at the end of the hall, right next to Lily's. As I lay there, scrolling on my phone, I heard something. A soft knock. It wasn't at my bedroom door. It was in the wall. At first, I thought it might be the pipes or some kind of animal in the walls. But the knock came again. This time, it was louder. I sat up, holding my breath. I stared at the wall for what felt like forever, waiting to hear it again. When nothing happened, I convinced myself it was just my imagination and went asleep. The next morning, I told my dad about it while he was making coffee. He laughed and said, "Old houses make weird noises. You'll get used to it." But things didn't stop there. A few days later, Lily came running into the kitchen, crying. She said she saw a man outside by the well. My dad immediately went out to check, but there was no one there. He reassured her it was probably just a shadow or maybe even her imagination. But Lily was insistent. She said he was tall, wearing all black, and had no face. The way she described him made my skin crawl. I tried to joke it off, saying, "Maybe it's the well monster." But Lily didn't laugh. She just glared at me and said, "It's not funny." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing creaks and groans from the house. Every little noise made me sit up and listen. Around 2 a.m., I heard it again, the knock in the wall. This time, it was right next to my bed. I turned on my phone's flashlight and pressed my hand against the wall. To my shock, the wall felt warm. I pulled my hand back like I'd been burned. Every instinct in me screamed to get out of that room. But where would I go? My parents would just tell me I was imagining things. So, I spent the rest of the night wide awake, staring at the wall. The next day, my dad decided to take a closer look at the well. He'd been hearing about it all week, from me, from Lily, and I think he was starting to get curious. When he pulled off the rotting wooden cover, we saw something we weren't expecting, a ladder. It was old and rusty, leading down into darkness. My dad shrugged it off, saying it was probably for maintenance, but it felt wrong. The ladder looked out of place, like it didn't belong there. My mom told him to cover it back up and leave it alone. "No need to go looking for trouble," she said, half joking. That night, I begged my parents to let me sleep in the living room. I didn't tell them why. I just said my room felt too cold. They didn't argue. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of creaking floorboards. I peeked over the edge of the couch, and in the dim light from the hallway, I saw someone standing at the bottom of the stairs. At first, I thought it was my dad, but the figure was too tall, and its posture was off. It was standing perfectly still, facing the stairs. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't make a sound. I just stared, hoping it would go away. And then, it turned its head toward me. I threw the blanket over my head and squeezed my eyes shut, praying it was just a dream. The next thing I knew, it was morning, and the figure was gone. I tried to tell my parents what I saw, but they didn't believe me. "It was probably a shadow," my dad said. "Or maybe you were dreaming." I started to doubt myself. Maybe I was dreaming. But then, Lily came downstairs, holding one of her dolls. She looked at me and said, "He likes you." "Who?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "The man from the well," she said. The last straw came a week later. It was a Saturday afternoon, and my dad was working in the yard. Lily was playing near the well, talking to herself like she always did. At least, that's what we thought. Suddenly, my dad yelled for us to come outside. When we got there, he was standing by the well, looking pale. He said he'd heard Lily talking, but when he got closer, he realized she wasn't alone. There was a man's voice coming from the well, answering her. Lily looked up at us, confused. "He says he wants me to come down," she said. That night, my dad locked the door to the backyard and told us to stay inside. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't safe, not even in the house. Around midnight, I heard footsteps in the hallway. I opened my door just a crack and saw Lily standing there, holding her doll. She was staring at the wall, her head tilted to the side. "Lily?" I whispered. She didn't answer. She just pressed her hand against the wall and said, "He's here." I ran to get my parents. By the time we got back, Lily was lying on the floor, fast asleep. My mom carried her back to bed while my dad checked the wall. Of course, he didn't find anything, but the house wasn't done with us. The next morning, we found muddy footprints in the kitchen. They started at the back door and led all the way to the basement. My dad grabbed a baseball bat and went downstairs, but there was no one there. What he did find was even more unsettling. The small basement window had been shattered, and a few boxes of old decorations were missing. The footprints stopped at the basement door, which had a heavy-duty lock. My dad called the police, but they didn't find anything either. They said it was probably a break-in, but we all knew it was more than that. The final night in that house is one I'll never forget. It started with the knock. This time, it wasn't just in my wall. It was everywhere. The walls, the ceiling, the floor. The whole house felt alive. We all gathered in the living room, too scared to go to bed. Around 2 a.m., the knocking stopped. For a moment, it was silent. And then, the front door handle started to turn. My dad grabbed the bat and yelled, "Who's there?" There was no answer, just the sound of the door handle rattling. Then, a loud bang, like someone throwing their weight against the door. We huddled together, too scared to move. My dad called the police, but before they arrived, we heard it, footsteps in the house. The police found nothing when they got there. No signs of forced entry, no footprints. But we knew what we'd heard. The next day, we packed up and left. We didn't sell the house. We didn't even go back for our things. We just left. Even now, years later, I can still hear the knocking in my dreams. I don't know what was in that house, and I don't want to know. All I know is that whatever it was, it didn't want us there.